I thought that in order to be a performer on stage, everything you do has to be perfect. So this incident, I woke up in the night and I had an extreme pain. I remember lying there and I could feel something inside my body that was, I didn't know what it was, but it felt like something was like blood flowing or something. So from that incident onwards, I had chronic neck and pain at the base of my skull constantly.
That was Bangkok singer Athalie de Koning, and the incident she just described took place in 2015 when she was in her late 20s. That night, she was convinced that she was bleeding to death. Instead, it marked the beginning of a profound transformation, one that would ultimately force her to rethink what it meant to be a great singer. And perfectionism had little to do with it. Welcome to the X Perspective podcast. I'm your host, Raj, and this is episode 24. Are you a perfectionist? Or maybe you have perfectionist tendencies and don't even realize it. Or perhaps you're just simply curious about how a perfectionist thinks. Well, in today's episode, we'll explore perfectionism through the lens of a Bangkok singer, Athalie de Koning. For the very first time, this 39-year-old Dutch immigrant publicly opens up about her struggles with being the perfect singer. She also shares a deeply personal and terrifying incident that ultimately led her to acknowledge and deal with her inner critic. But why was Athalie a perfectionist in the first place? What was her perfectionism protecting her from? And does she still have perfectionist tendencies today? She reveals it all in this fascinating conversation. So come with me and discover just how powerful, transformative, and liberating it can be to let go of the need to be perfect and find out why, for this Bangkok performer, doing so ultimately made her a better singer. Here's a hint. For Athalie, it's all about connection.
I never thought I was a perfectionist. I always just thought, well, but things just have to be a certain way, right? And that certain way for me was a bar that was super high. If there was like one little thingy in my voice, right, I could just be replaying that over and over and over. So I think the standard I set for myself was very high, but I didn't consider it high. I thought that was just normal. So if you're going to be on a stage, that's how good you have to be. And so I think it definitely made me, very self-critical. And I always give other people a lot more grace than I give myself. So I'm like, if somebody else plays it wrong, that's okay. Like, no worries. We can, a mistake is an opportunity and that kind of stuff. But I didn't apply the same standard to myself.
Why?
I'm not sure in a nutshell. I'm sure there could be a whole history of, like psychological reasons, but maybe one is I grew up moving around a lot. And so one of the ways that I would quickly integrate and bond with people was by just being kind of really good at stuff. So if I was really good at learning a new language, if I was really good at, my schoolwork, it would be the quickest way to sort of find my way in a new place.
So what I'm hearing is that you didn't realize that you were a perfectionist, but you had the tendencies to be a perfectionist, which you were unaware of.
Absolutely.
And this started, I guess, in your childhood as you were moving around. So when did you find out that you were a perfectionist?
That wasn't until very recently, actually, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So I had been through, we're going to be talking about some of the stuff that I had experienced. But at a certain point, I started going through a process of sort of finding these parts in myself and being able to let them go. And one conversation I remember having was with my brother, who came and stayed with us for a while. While he was actually working on some music. So we had conversations about creativity and music. And then he said to me, "Oh yeah, because you're a perfectionist like me. And I said, "Wait, I'm not. Maybe you are, but I'm not." Yeah. And so then he started kind of pointing out some things like, about the standards he sets. And I was like, yeah, me too, but that's like normal, right? And he said, well, look, okay, your normal is actually this really impossibly high standard you set for yourself. And acknowledging that that is perfectionism is not necessarily a bad thing.
It's interesting that if you're a perfectionist, like in this case, your brother, he admit that he was a perfectionist. He can see the perfectionism in someone else.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So tell me more before we get into your story about what happened to you several years ago that really impacted your life as a singer. It was a very tragic event. We'll get into that. But tell me, before that event, what kind of standards were you setting? You touched on it a little bit, but tell me a little bit more. Like, what were you expecting of yourself as a singer?
As a singer, I have to be really honest with you that I was hypercritical even when I went out and listened to other people in live performances. When you have, and back then I didn't really, I think like many people, I didn't really know the difference either between studio work and live. Growing up, I did go and see, like I was more in the opera scene growing up, so it's a whole different world. Maybe also the lens I looked at it through when I was younger, I didn't really recall seeing a lot of mistakes or you know. And so I thought that in order to be a performer on stage, everything you do has to be perfect. So it's like if your voice cracks or something like that, it's like the end of the world. That was a bad performance in my mind. If you forget something, if you forget a lyric or something, like, whoa, that's really bad. And when I went to conservatory, it's kind of reinforced in a sense. I think it's also it may strengthen parts of your personality that you didn't know you had. But especially the classical side of it tends to be very, very rigid. Like, this is how it's going to be. This is the aesthetic. This is how it should be. And many classical musicians, when I was there at conservatory, were very, like, you can see and feel it in their body language as well, setting impossibly high standards and having a sort of rigidity. And so that was one side. And I was in a track that we had to do parts of every style. And so, but even on the pop side, it's kind of, I always took those nuggets of like, it has to sound perfect. A note can't be off even just a little bit. And things like that. I'm not saying that's exactly what they taught me, but it's what I took out of it. Like, I used to cover up mistakes by being overly theatrical. And that's something that my professors actually like marked me down on. And they said, oh, it's too much. And you have to, now I understand they were saying I have to show more of myself. But back then I took it as everything has to be perfect.
Can you think of an example where you did overdo it?
Oh, I'm trying to think. It was like an exam, and I was nervous about a certain part of the song. And so I think it was from The Wiz, I think. Feeling. I can't remember the song exactly, but it's something about feelings. And so instead of going into the feelings, I was like, whoa, like, I don't know, doing a lot of movements and things like that. And they were like, look, this is about your voice today and not about all the extra. And in retrospect, I don't think like that was a big deal. They're just showing me some balance. But at the time, I took it as, okay, so from now on, no more theatrics at all. I just have to sing perfectly. Like, that's what I took out of it.
Right.
Which is a bit of a pity, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go into the incident that happened. It was about 10 years ago where you had an incident where it really shook you and it was very dramatic. So can you tell me about that?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's 10 years ago last year. So it kind of, I felt that last year in a way too. It was almost like it was, like a milestone, kind of like, oh, it's 10 years ago.
You were like in your late 20s at that time.
Yeah, okay. Late 20s. Okay. And so I had never had any major health incidents before. I was not somebody who had like headaches growing up. I did have a lot of illness, like bronchitis and stuff growing up and allergies, but I'd never had things like with my head, right? And for me growing up, my brain was always something I could definitely rely on. I was good at school and a quick thinker. So this incident, I woke up in the night and I had an extreme pain, which felt like kind of lower abdomen. And the pain was super, super, super bad. And I somehow managed to make my way downstairs. But the pain was so bad, I ended up fainting. And so I don't really remember that much about what happened, but the next thing that I remember was waking up and it was like emergency services. I think I may have even told my husband, like, hey, call, 191 or whatever the Thai number is for that. But what we found out later is I fell so hard in the bathroom that it woke up my husband, and he's a very deep sleeper. So
Wow.
he heard like a really, really loud thud. He came down and I was like just pretty much out of it. And we found several bumps on my head on different sides later. So we think that I was fainting, waking up, trying to move, and fainting again a couple of times. So I hit my head a few times really hard. The thing that was really impactful for me is that I remember lying there and I could feel something inside my body that I didn't know what it was, but it felt like something was like blood flowing or something. So I thought in that moment that I was, and this is not logical, but I thought I was like bleeding internally and that I was going to die. And so what I remember is having a conversation with my husband and saying to him, hey, we've had a really good time, or like we've had a good life together and it's going to be okay. Like, don't worry. And I was reassuring him. That's what I remember. And I remember feeling peaceful. Like I wasn't scared in that moment. But I did think that I was going to, that I was not going to make it. But I found out years later, because this was always my narrative of what happened. And I was happy I was able to give him peace in that very difficult time. But I found out like quite a few years later, we were kind of talking about it. And he said, yeah, but actually you didn't say that to me at all. Like you were unresponsive. So for him, it was also an ending, but I wasn't reassuring him, in his mind. So that to me is like, it shows how serious this was for both of us, that we really didn't know if I was going to make it or not. And so anyway, then after that, the ambulance came and so I went to the hospital. And then they did a bunch of tests. First, they thought it was, what's it called? The appendix. Mm-hmm. So they checked that. And then it was very confusing because I said the pain was here, but by then I had like a major concussion from the falling. And so it became really hard after that to kind of where the focus should be. And basically the emergency doctors were just checking like, is she going to be okay? Is she going to make it? And so they ended up finding out that I had ovarian cysts, multiple cysts. And they thought what probably happened is that either one of them maybe got twisted or burst, which is what caused that pain. And I also found out later, quite a lot of women have this and don't know at all what it is. And they faint and they go to the hospital. Like this is actually not that uncommon, but I had never heard about it until it happened to me. So.
How did you feel when you woke up knowing that you had fainted?
It was weird because I'd never fainted in my life before that. Actually, I would say I'm not a fainter. So it was just really strange for me. And I don't remember thinking that much particularly, just like, oh yeah, I'm still alive. And then kind of like immediately going into steps, like organization mode, like, okay, am I going to make it? What do we have to do?
Wow. It sounds so scary.
Yes, it was very, very scary.
But you survived. Now tell me, what did you start experiencing after this incident? You told me that you had memory loss while you were on stage.
Yes, that's right.
Talk to me about that.
So shortly after the emergency, and they basically checked my whole body and were like, actually, you're going to be fine. You don't have internal bleeding or anything. So I could go home. And my brother-in-law at the time sent me a message and said, be careful, you have had a concussion, maybe whiplash symptoms. If you don't take good care of this now, this could be a big problem later on. And I did not listen. I was, in that mode of my life of like wanting to be good at everything and just getting on with it. I had shows planned. So I was like, I'm just going to go back as soon as possible.
Was there denial there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would say throughout my 20s, I was not so in touch with my body. I was very used to doing things by willpower and mind power, instead of checking in with my body. So I definitely was in denial. And I was like, I can go back and I can do this on willpower alone. So I went, back on stage and I had memory loss. that I would say is not significant enough to be hospitalized, you know what I mean? But it was in little things. So I would suddenly blank out on something randomly that normally I would never have problems like recalling something quickly.
Like what?
So, very obvious one is lyrics. So I would be on stage and doing songs that we've done for ages, and I would just suddenly have like completely black in my mind, like nothing. And besides that, I also had really bad pain all the time. So from that incident onwards, I had chronic neck and pain at the base of my skull constantly, like just nonstop. But I refused to acknowledge it as chronic pain. I didn't even know that term, to be honest. So yeah, the pain affected my moods at the time. I did have a conversation with my band, and I had read, of course, the brain thing, right? I had read all about this stuff. And I just told my band, like, hey, if I'm like more irritable or if I react weirdly, it could be because of this incident that I had. But that's about all. And I kind of wanted to move on from it as quickly as possible.
So now you're in this position where before you were trying to have this version of yourself being the perfect singer, and now you're being forced to be imperfect on stage.
Yes.
How did that change you?
Well, I had a hard time with it. First of all, I was already not perfect before, and I was very harsh on myself about that. So I knew that I wasn't always doing the best job, but I tried. Around this time, I made the mistake of reading some reviews. I got one bad review that talked about, she's not that great and all this. And
wait, this is after your incident?
It was around that time. So I think it was after. I can't remember the timeline, but I read it after. So I don't know if they wrote it before or after, to be honest. But so for me, I read this after. And so it's almost like looking for confirmation that, I'm not doing well. But I read this review and I was like, I felt terrible. But instead of acknowledging what's going on in my body and what's, this memory loss is something that was so big for me because my whole life I'd relied on having a good memory and being, smart. And so it was kind of like my brain isn't doing what it's supposed to do. But instead of acknowledging it and sitting with it and working through it, I tried to just push on and get more work and get more, be out there more to try to be better.
But eventually you did get to a point where you started letting go of these high standards you were setting for yourself. Talk to me about this process of letting go. Was it slow? Was it gradual? Did you have a lot of inner conflict while this was happening? And another question, when did you finally start letting go?
Mm-hmm. I would say, so for about 3 years, I soldiered on and kind of did not acknowledge my pain, my chronic pain. And I do think, all things considered, I think I did well. I was singing 6 nights a week and, enjoying it and, really out there. But I wasn't really aligned with my own needs, I would say. So I don't look back and regret it. I think I had so many experiences that I'm really proud of and happy with. But about 3 years into it, we had a family reunion and I was with my sisters and they're really good at asking deeper questions. And so they were really taking the time to listen to me more deeply. And I was telling them about the pain. And it was the first time I said it out loud that actually, I've had pain nonstop. And I started crying, which is quite unusual for me, or it was then. I'm much better at crying now than I used to be. So
was this like the mask that you wore that you didn't want to show any vulnerability at that time? Is that why you never showed yourself crying?
I would say it's not conscious. So it's like a lot of times emotions just didn't come through that. I'm pretty, I have a pretty much of an equilibrium in general. I'm very comfortable being like, not too many like highs and lows emotionally. That's just my personality, I would say. I'm kind of a even-keeled person, but I do believe that there was a big separation between my mind and my body. And so acknowledging what was going on in my body allowed my body to be like, guess what? These tears are something you need to like let out. Mm-hmm. So I think that's more what it was. It wasn't a conscious choice to try to mask it, but it was just such a big part of how I dealt with life in general. Yeah.
Okay, so you tell your sisters. Then what happens?
So then once I acknowledged there was pain, well, then I really felt it. So it was something, you're pushing something down for so long. When you finally acknowledge it's there, oh, it's really there. So after that, way more pain because I was facing it and seeing it was there. So,
Mentally or physically?
Physically. So then I started to realize how much this pain had been impacting me for all these years. And so then started the slow journey of sitting with that pain and also trying to find solutions, like going to different doctors and physiotherapy and all these things.
Yeah.
And finding, for a long time, not finding something to heal that pain. So then also the next step of the grief of saying, hey, maybe this pain is going to be with me forever, right? And so there was a wonderful person that I went to for something called craniosacral therapy. It's something that where they kind of like, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but they kind of like move parts of your neck and skull very slowly.
Oh, wow.
And then this person was so good at holding space that she also really gave space to the pain, both physically and emotionally. Even the trauma of such an experience, a near-death experience that I'd never bothered to discuss with anybody, how scary that was. So this person really helped me to face that and sit with it, and also sit with the possibility that maybe chronic pain might become part of my life. And then what are you going to do with it? When are you going to, give it space to move? When are you going to just have it next to you as a friend? You know what I mean? Like, how can you relate to this in different ways? And that was really, really helpful for me.
I want to talk more about when you first went on stage and you showed your vulnerability. Can you describe to me how that felt?
Yeah, that's exactly this. When it came to the part of accepting that there is real pain, that's for the first time that it clicked for me. And now it seems like duh, but back then it was very new. It was like, wait a minute. All these songs that I'm singing, which like the music I love, or that I do lots of music, but the one that I really love is jazz, right? So there are jazz songs that are, most of them are about the human condition. So jazz was born out of very difficult circumstances, right? Jazz and blues. And so these are songs about everything we experience as humans: heartbreak, joy, passion, betrayal, all these things. And so it finally clicked for me that, hey, actually all these parts of me that are broken are what enrich these songs. So instead of singing them in a perfect way, if my voice breaks, even if I cry on stage, it's me telling a story that's so real. And bringing that, it changed everything, because instead of trying to be somebody, I suddenly was a real person, like a whole and integrated person. And immediately I felt the difference with the audience, because by being a whole integrated person, I also had space to let other people's stories in, rather than worrying about what they thought, like whether they thought it was good enough. People don't care most of the time, unless they're struggling with the same thing I was struggling with. But most of the time, people don't care about that. What they care about is hearing their story being told, or finding parts that resonate with them. And so once I got back on stage and was there broken, and I remember after that, I would go up and I would say sometimes like, actually today, like I'm not feeling too great, or, I've had a rough morning or whatever. And you would see people nodding along. And then I'd be like, well, but we're here now. Let's see what we can create together in this moment. Yeah. And so it really radically changed my performance.
Just making that connection with your audience already makes them feel connected to you.
Yes.
Before you even sing.
Yes. And so that's when it really changed for me, that music is not about perfection, but about connection. So if it's perfect, it's actually boring, genuinely. It's like, we know now with autotune and everything, when things are pitched too perfectly, it doesn't feel human anymore, right? So it's about connecting with the people that are there. Yeah.
When you look back at yourself, when you were trying to be perfect or trying to meet that standard, do you feel like you were boring in terms of a performer compared to what you are today?
Yes, I can wholeheartedly say yes, absolutely. And so that negative review, they had a point. They were basically saying, she's up there, she's kind of like, kind of trying to perform, which is very inauthentic.
Trying too hard?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, which makes it you can tell a person is not connected to the material.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did letting go of the perfection at first, did it feel like a failure at all to you?
I would say the failure part was in the mistakes I was making anyway. So I don't think I consciously at that time connected it with perfection, but it was like, oh, I'm failing by, not doing well and forgetting things. And, and I became very dependent on my iPad. Like I have to have lyrics because I was so worried that I was going to forget. And so people ask me sometimes, other singers, like, do you think it's wrong to have an iPad on stage? I still have mine now. I mean, we do hundreds of songs, so we also keep it in case there's a song that, that we don't know that well or something new. For me, I needed it at the time because I was genuinely blanking out. But even now, I'm much more forgiving with those things. It's like, if they need sheet music or, or an iPad or a stuffed animal or whatever they might need on stage, as long as that's not the focal point and it's not your crutch, but as long as it helps you to be present, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
And I also think it's okay to acknowledge because every person functions differently.
For sure.
So.
And as you're talking, I'm thinking as a podcaster, sure, I prepare for these episodes and I have my questions, but I try not to read my questions because when I start doing that so much and I'm so concentrated on trying to get through all the questions, I feel like the focus, the presence is gone.
Yes.
And then the connection with the guest isn't as much as it would be if I was actually looking at you and talking to you.
And listening,
right?
Right?
Yeah. So I can relate with that. And it does make it so much better.
Yes. Yeah.
When you're really focused and present. I feel presence is very, very important.
Yeah.
Not just thinking about, hey, how am I being judged at this time?
Exactly. Most people are concerned with themselves more than with you. And so it's liberating that it's like, you know what? They're out there. If they're looking like frowning or whatever, that used to worry me. Most people have no idea what they look like when they're listening.
Yeah.
So now if I see some people frowning in the audience, I'll go in the break and be like, hey, how are you guys doing? And sometimes the frown is like, and then they're like, I'm having a great time. And I'm like, oh, awesome. That's just your face. Like, no problem. I'm probably like that too. If I'm sitting and relaxed and, so they're not there to try to make me feel better. They're there to experience.
And you never know what's running through someone's mind, right? Like
Absolutely.
They might have just had a really hard day.
Yes.
And it's not even about you.
Exactly. Yeah. And one thing that you mentioned earlier about the letting go. So instead of, I think consciously, I wasn't like letting go of perfection necessarily, but letting go of the plan, which is exactly kind of what you're sketching here. It's like, I may plan to do a show this way, but actually once I threw that plan out the window, it became about, hey, what energy is here today?
Exactly.
Who's here in the room? And now, and that's the beauty of jazz, is you get to improvise as much as you want. And now I make the audience a part of that. So I say like, hey, depending on what we feel in the room tonight, like you guys are curating the songs we're going to do. And so they're like, whoa, okay, we're part of this.
And
We're
as you're
making
talking
something.
about that, it just seems so much more fun.
Yes.
You
It
just
is.
kind of go with the flow.
Yep,
Can
absolutely.
imagine. Yeah. Okay, what was the most difficult challenge in letting go of this idea that you had formed about yourself?
I think the most difficult part for me was acknowledging grief, because grief turned out to be something much bigger than just the incident. And you've done previous episodes about grief
Yes.
that I heard, and this topic is so important. I think I had a lot of grief put away in myself from my whole life of moving around so much. So I grew up moving every couple of years. And by the time I was 10, I think I had moved like 14 times or 17 times, something like that, like a lot.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of grief about having to constantly say goodbye. And so that's something that, once I realized grief shows up in so many different parts of life, I think that was the most difficult part for me, because it was like acknowledging the grief of chronic pain, acknowledging the grief of my body or my brain not working the way it used to, which, by the way, now I can trust my brain again. Like, I think it's doing pretty well, you know.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah. But you know, I didn't know at the time what was going to happen, right? So the ideas that I may have had about how I was going to function, I had to let that go. And by acknowledging that there was grief, suddenly I was like, it's a lot bigger basket than I thought. And so a lot of other things started coming up. That was the hardest.
That's interesting. I want to read a quote to you, and then we can talk about it, and let me know what you think about it, okay? This was a quote by Anne Quinlan. She's an American author. The thing that is really hard and really amazing is giving up on being perfect and beginning the work of becoming yourself.
That resonates hugely, hugely with me. Yes.
It is really hard, isn't it?
Yes. Letting go. So this is, letting go of the image of what you think you should be. It's not anybody's fault necessarily, but we just get so many messages growing up. And I think for me, moving between cultures, it was like in one culture, it was more acceptable to be this kind of person. In another culture, it was more acceptable to be this. For me here in Asia, for example, like even when I speak Thai, sometimes people find it kind of funny. My voice is very different. It's higher. It's more like, you know, a little more submissive and more gentle, and it fits better culturally. But my birth culture is more of a like in your face, like very direct kind of culture. And if you don't have an opinion, then you kind of don't count. So it's very polar opposite cultures. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with being culturally sensitive and culturally fluid. That's very much a part of who I am. And that's not fake. I think it's important to find yourself in that. So who am I? And acknowledging like these are the different parts of myself, and they're all okay. They don't have to look exactly like this to be right. You know?
It's difficult.
Yeah. Yes.
What surprised you the most about who you became after you embraced your imperfections?
Ooh. Okay, I like that question. What surprised me? So I've had some people over the years, and usually they're older gentlemen, have, when we've had like a little bit of a deeper conversation, and they find out that I'm not naturally an optimist. So like we've had a conversation and I'll be like, oh, well, I'm not naturally an optimist. And I've had a couple of people be disappointed about that because they say, you seem so positive, and like, I thought that was naturally you. And I say, well, it's not naturally me. And going deeper into that, what I actually mean by that is my first inclination is to be pretty critical and mostly self-critical, right? As we've talked about. I grew up seeing a lot of pain in the world. So the work that my parents did, working with people in difficult situations. So let's say as social workers and working with NGOs, helping people, we tended to see the people that really needed help and that were not in a good place. So I saw a lot of like the downsides of being human, I guess. I saw a lot of the parts of humanity that weren't the best. So especially in my teenage years, I think that made me very cynical, kind of not believing in the goodness of people. But at a certain point, I realized that cynicism wasn't going to get me anywhere. It would just, make me feel bad all the time. I think what surprised me is that once I could accept myself fully, it also meant that cynicism and sometimes the bouts of like melancholy that I have were okay to be there. And so it made the optimism a lot easier. Because for me, having both of it, like I don't really believe in saying like, I'm an optimist, I'm a pessimist, or, I used to always say I'm a realist, but then there's the saying that realists are just optimists who like gave up on their dreams. But anyway, that's kind of a tangent. But I don't really believe in those labels. I just think if we all can acknowledge both sides, then it's much easier to move between the two.
And how did this impact your singing?
It helped me to go through the roller coaster in real time, like on stage. So if I'm doing a song about losing somebody and heartbreak, I am completely that in that moment. I embody it fully. whether I've experienced or not, I feel as though I am experiencing it in that moment. So I can connect with whoever has had that. And if I'm doing a song about being happy, then in that moment, I'm happy no matter what happened hours before or, right before getting on stage. So I think that's the power, is that it brings me very much into the present, which means acknowledging my body, acknowledging where I'm at in that moment. And that for me has been beautiful because it's really, I would say it's even therapeutic. I mean, the difficult things in life shape us so much. If we grew up all rainbows and sunshine, we wouldn't have the resilience that we have, right? And so I think
it builds character.
Yes, it builds character. And I couldn't, those first 3 years when I was not acknowledging how I was feeling, what I wanted was immediately to jump to the positive story, right? So it happened, and within a couple of weeks, I was like, I'm back on stage, I'm good to go, I was trying to build a positive story out of it when actually my body wasn't ready for it. My deeper emotional self wasn't ready for it. So I think that's the importance of really acknowledging and that letting go of the story you're trying to build and acknowledging the real story, embracing that.
Now, here's an interesting question. You were looking at the audience before, you mentioned this, before your incident, and you had a certain image perhaps of how people were judging you or looking at you. And then what changed when you became more yourself on stage? Did you notice any difference in how people looked at you?
I think the difference came for me in that I no longer worried how they were looking at me, but I started seeing them. And that really changed a lot for me because it meant that my interactions with people afterwards were much more real. And so since then, I've had some guests that, we maybe have met once at a show. Even recently, they'll be thrilled that I'm telling this story. I hope they're listening to this. But we met 3 years ago at a show, had such a warm, real connection. And then they were in town and they're like, hey, let's meet up. And it felt like that, even though we don't know that much about each other when it really comes down to it. But the connection is so real. So I think that's what really changed is it's no longer what do they think of me? It's how are we meeting each other? And it has enriched my life. Actually, my heart has become a lot bigger, I would say. It's like I just have more space for people, more grace for everybody's stories because I'm also no longer judging myself as harshly.
That is so beautiful. That is so nice to be feeling that way, to get to that space.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel really grateful. And I also don't believe that I could have skipped a few steps and had this in my 20s. So this is also a thing I love about being in this phase of my life, being in my 30s. It's such a different focus and different energy. And I truly, truly love it. I really love it.
How has your definition changed now of what it means to be a great singer personally?
Yes. Oh, I have some thoughts about this.
Okay, I'm excited.
So I believe a great singer or a great performer is somebody who is connected to themselves and connected to those around. So that means also connected to the band, connected to the audience, connected to the staff who's serving everybody, having that awareness that we are a community. And so I think that's what makes a great singer. If they're not technically perfect, but they tell a story and you believe them and you feel it with them, to me, I love that kind of a performance so much more than a pitch perfect performance. And so even when I hear songs that have been heavily edited, which nowadays, almost everything is very, very produced, I can still appreciate it for what it is. Like it's sort of a more static work of art. I think that's still, it takes a lot of processes to get there. But for me, it feels less alive than when it has the imperfections. And I really believe that with, all the developments in AI, which are really cool and amazing, I do believe we as humans are going to yearn for authenticity again. So I really do believe there's going to be a counter movement of people meeting one another and remembering what it's like to be imperfect and to show up without a filter or without a pitch correction.
And to have that connection. That's what I'm hearing from you as well, that the importance of connection. When you are a performer or a singer, the connection needs to be there.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm actually, so I'm an introvert, and most people who see me perform would definitely think I'm an extrovert. It also means connection with yourself. So for me, when I'm there and, interacting with people and connecting with them, it's really an energy that I think is good and positive. And I also have to remember that in order to have that and to have the space for that, I also need the connection with myself, check in with myself, and have the alone time to like recharge and be ready to go out again.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And important.
Are you would you say you're one or the other, or sort of in between introvert and extrovert?
I love that question. I've thought about it a lot. I am both, if you can believe that. In high school, when I was growing up, I was definitely an introvert. Mm-hmm. But then during my life, what really changed was when I started traveling. I started going out and I was starting to talk to people, and I was like, whoa, who are you? Like, you're supposed to be an introvert. You're not supposed to be talking to people. Where is all this coming from? And then I started realizing there was another part of me which I had not recognized because of my environment. Oh, yes. So when I went out into the world and I started going to different countries and talking to different people, I realized that I was also an extrovert and very curious person. I loved asking questions, and this is why I'm doing the podcast today too, because I'm a very curious person and I love meeting new people. And like you're talking about building that connection, I feel is so important. Yeah. Right? And so, to answer your question, I'm both. Like sometimes I feel I do need that time and space to just be with myself and recharge. But then I love going out and talking to people. Yeah. But then if I do that so much, then I get drained. Yeah. So same. There's a balance. Yeah. Right?
Exactly the same. Because like if I'm by myself too long, like, and then I might not realize actually I need a bit of that, social as well to be refreshed.
It keeps me balanced. And I love that because you learn different things about yourself in both situations, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I can really hear that curiosity in you, and I love that too. As an educator, I love curious people. It's so nice.
I feel so happy that I have that, like, just naturally. I'm just truly just interested. And that's why I love traveling as well. Because it takes you to different places. And when I travel, it's not just going to the resort. It's like actually getting into a place and meeting the people and seeing how they live, what they do, and like, who are they? Right? Like, what's their story? See what happens when you ask me a question?
Yeah. I love it. Just getting to know you. Yeah, that's great.
But I do have another question for you. Do you still feel that sometimes these perfectionist tendencies creep in sometimes?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So there's a common phenomenon, which there's many different names for it, but like the post-show blues, or like, a lot of artists have this where you've been working towards something, you finally do the performance, and then you just fall into like a deep pit of despair afterwards. I have it. I still, every time, no matter how much I've practiced, getting out of it, I tend to have this a lot. So if I've worked towards something and then I do it, and on the night itself, it's like a great success, and the next day I might still have a bit of that high. And every time I fall into the same, pitfall where I think, I'm not going to have the blues this time. I'm feeling great. And then it inevitably always comes a few days later, sometimes, usually a few days later. And suddenly I replay the same night, but with a completely different lens. And it's a lens of like negativity. So I pick it apart. And this happens. It's just seems to be a way that my brain processes things, right? And so I've gone through phases of trying to handle that in different ways. Like, the way that didn't work was trying to deny it and being like, no, but look, it was okay. It didn't work. My brain needed the time to have that opposite just to, to process it, I guess. And so now I've learned that when that happens, and it always does, then I just need to have a day or a couple of days where I'm really nice to myself. I just do something I enjoy. I try not to numb myself, because I used to do that, like distract myself to not think about it. But the truth is, it needs to happen in order for me to sort of like clean the slate and have new space for new inspiration. So that was hard for me though to acknowledge, because I hate it. It's not a nice process, and it's so negative. But now I also know, like, I have a few trusted people, like, for example, my sisters, that I know that when I'm in that space, I can call them and just say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. They can either sit with me and just hear it, or they can, if I ask for it, like, what's your perspective? What do you think? Or I can ask my partner, like, objectively, what was this really bad? And I believe them when they tell me, you know, how they perceived it. So that's really helpful, because, you know, when you're in a negative space and somebody says, no, it was great, you don't believe them, because your inner critic is not there at that moment, right? Doesn't have the space for it. So I found a few ways to like allow it to be there, and knowing that, okay, this is that part of me, that perfectionist, which also brought me to where I am. So I have to honor her as well and let her say her piece. And once she said it, then we can move on. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Like that you allow space for that energy.
Yeah. I have to, because if I don't, then it festers. And I think that would be the lesson from that incident as well, is like trying to push something down for really long, it just ends up
being worse.
Yes.
If you hadn't been forced to change because of this incident, do you think you would have?
Do I think I would have changed without
what happened to you?
So if my life had just continued the way it was, I think I wouldn't be as good of a performer as I am now. I genuinely think I would have continued on in the same sort of more regimented way. You know, maybe I still would be out there doing things. Probably, yes. I think at some point I would have run into myself, for sure. So, but maybe it would have then been later on in life. But I think at some point there would be that clash of like, this isn't real, or it isn't fully me. It isn't fully integrated. So I think somehow the shift would have come, but maybe it would have been later down the road, or like a midlife crisis or something like that, you know, which who knows, it may still happen.
So do you have any message that you might want to give right now to people who are struggling with perfectionism?
If they know they have it, all right? So if they know, okay, I'm a perfectionist, I would like to be less of a perfectionist, I think my first thing would be, what does space look like in your body? So I would ask them to feel in their body, hey, this negative voice that you have, which part of your body does it live in? Does it live in your brain? Or is it in your throat? Or is it in your heart? Like, to kind of envision that, because it kind of helps you to see that it's not an all-encompassing thing, right? It might be a part of yourself. And then to invite them to have a conversation with that perfectionist part of themselves, and to ask it questions like, hey, what are you trying to protect me from? What messages have you gained along the way that I'm still holding on to? So I think that's what I would invite people to have a conversation with their perfectionism and create some space around it.
Did you ever figure out what you were protecting yourself from when you were trying to be a perfectionist?
Oh, wow. That's a really, really good question, actually. Really good question. Ooh, I think at some level it has to do with my always having to reinvent myself every couple of years. So I think that's where that crept in, that every time we moved, I had to, I felt like I quickly had to fit in. So I think my perfectionism was protecting me probably from rejection and loneliness. I felt a lot of loneliness in my life precisely because I've moved around so much. So I never had the roots that people talk about, like, I've been here in this house my whole life, I never had that. So I think my perfectionism was trying to protect me from being lonely, but in a sense, it made me more lonely. It's like, it's isolating when you're trying to be perfect.
If you could speak to your 25-year-old self who was trying to be so perfect, what would you tell her?
Be gentle. It's okay to feel the way you're feeling. It's also okay to want to be good at something. I don't think ambition is bad. But be gentle, and also realize you don't have to have everything right right away. Take the time to explore things. And also, much more importantly, look for connection. So when you're trying to find your way in the world and trying to be somebody, I guess, because at that age, you're still trying to build yourself in a sense, find that through connection rather than perfection. It brings it back to the same thing. So find it by really being a complete human being with both the good and the bad.
I love how Athalie has found a way to deal with her inner critic. As she said, although it is a negative process, she allows space for it and then moves on. She doesn't let those negative thoughts fester. If you are a perfectionist, how do you deal with your inner critic? I hope this story has also revealed the value of being imperfect. Would you agree with Athalie that authenticity shines through when we let go of the idea of being perfect? I'd like to end with these challenging questions. If you are a perfectionist, ask yourself, why are you trying to be perfect? And what might happen if you stopped trying so hard to be perfect? Thanks so much for your attention and time. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting us on Patreon or buying us a Thai milk tea. You can visit the X Perspective podcast website for more information. There are also links in the description section. Your support helps us keep sharing meaningful stories. And please don't forget to subscribe so you'll be notified whenever a new episode drops. Ever get to the end of the month and wonder where all your money went? Well, now there's a free app called Enough Spent. You open it, type what you spent, and you're done. Your coffee won't even get cold. It works in over 150 currencies, which is great if you're traveling, and it works offline too. No account needed, no sign up. If you've ever wanted to track your spending without dealing with some complicated finance app, search for Enough Spent on Google Play. Thanks again for being here, and remember, every perspective creates a story. See you in episode 25.